Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you are joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And listen, we are all still dealing with the impacts and the effects of COVID, which led right into the major and massive impacts of Ida. And so we don't want to pretend like we're not still dealing with that. So we're always glad to have one of our favorite local professionals come on, talk with us about that. Ms. Lisa Schilling, LCSW, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Well, listen, we always like to come and listen to what you have to say. You very often are the one organization that really has a good finger on the pulse of what's happening with our people. Let's talk a little bit about this 1 year, I'd like to call it recovery, but not everybody has had the same level of recovery as we've talked about.
No, it was hard already, like you said, with the pandemic. I mean, so much had happened and people, it just seemed like it will never end. It's still being talked about. We're in different phases of COVID right now, and then there's monkeypox. And so dealing with all of that, and then all of a sudden, hurricane season last year, and just a whopper of a woman that came through by the name of Ida.
She's a mean woman.
She was a mean woman. And, I think it was a shock, first of all, to everyone. A shock to everyone about how she affected our areas and how our people were affected. And so normally, anytime there's a disaster or an event like that, it's usually 6 months to a year afterwards that people really start to realize what they went through and how they responded, and also to know that at some point we need some help to work through this. So you're in that shock phase for a very long time. You're running on empty, so to speak. You're going through the motions, and you're trying to get everything done that you need to do to take care of your home, your family, and everything else just kind of gets set on the back burner, your emotions and everything, but they do come to the surface.
Right.
The anger that you feel about what happened to you, also the anger that you might have at some of the insurance companies or people not showing up to do work in your home, not being able to deal with being at home or not having a home to live in. Mm-hmm. So we're in trailers, we're in campers. We don't want to leave our land. We have a lot of people like that down the bayous. You can't blame them.
No.
And so
for them, a lot of them, that's all they have.
That's
and
all they know.
Quite frankly, they kind of define themselves that way.
Most definitely.
That's their self-identification.
Most definitely. And I think for us, it was immediate. We were immediately on our call line. Right after it happened, became our single point of entry. I can't even tell you the number of calls that we fielded. Probably those first 3 months, it was around 10,000. And those were people that were evacuated and calling and saying, we need our medication. And can I talk to my provider? Can I talk to my counselor? We were trying to do everything that we could to connect them. And so connectivity was an issue as well, as we all know.
Right.
And so people, you really just have to adjust. You have to be flexible. And you have to find ways to make things work and to get those individuals what they need at that point in time. Because it's very crucial, as you and I both know, for individuals with behavioral health problems. So mental health, addictions, and even our developmental disability clients,
Wow.
They need to have real stable environments to be able to thrive. And so when anything like a storm happens, any type of disaster, it really just throws them completely off of their game.
And so both physically and metaphorically, structure matters.
Structure matters.
And so physically, for those that don't have a home, are the volume of people that still don't have their home back. And I say that from those people that are just getting their houses gutted, if you will,
Right.
to those people that are maybe the last thing they're waiting on is shutters.
Right.
But think about the anxiety that is created across that spectrum.
Yeah.
Those that are maybe just glad that they got insurance money versus those of us who are on a waiting list for shutters, where we're having to do something differently this hurricane season, as we are truly in the very height of hurricane season as we speak in these next few days.
Most definitely. And I think, you touched on the physical and the mental, but it's also emotional. And it just, and socially, because everyone's support system, the dynamics were just blown apart. So fragmented is a good word for that. And so I find that working with our patients, it became a real issue, and trying to work through that, but our staff too. And if we could go to that one slide I have on lessons learned from Ida, I can tell you what we learned at South Central.
Okay.
And so get ahead of the storm if possible. And I mean by the fact that we do this regularly, but from now on, we're really going to make that effort, a couple of weeks out, contacting the patients for their medication refills. We provide that for them, 2 weeks meds if you come in and get it, but also being able to say we can do this refill too as well. Injections, we want to keep our people on their game.
Yeah.
They're got to be compliant, discussing their evacuation plans, providing guidance, resources, so all of that, and training as well.
Right.
And then to always be ready to pivot. This is so important. So establishing means of communication is key. So we had our call line, now we have satellite phones, hotspots, our staffing call tree, whatever we needed to do, immediate contact through our website, our electronic health record portal, and our agency, just being communicating
Right.
constantly.
And so that is the one thing, as we learned, like all of us learned, and you guys learned it in a very large way with those 10,000 calls that you got, finding a way to be present,
Yes.
finding a way to have some communication really made a huge difference.
A connection. That's
Right.
all we were trying to do, is connect with them.
Right.
This next thing, our job is any job that needs to be done. So, job descriptions go out the window, and it
Right.
is about doing whatever we had to do to make sure that we were in our clinics seeing clients, and that we're having that communication, going out to shelters, doing the camps. And then the most important thing that we had is that we had to take care of our staff. And so to make sure that they were good emotionally, physically, all of that, and, trying to keep them really healthy during that time too.
As we spend some time talking about what we learned, and I love really recapping this a little bit because it's important for those people who are still struggling. You mentioned anger in the last segment, and it's just one of those things where some people are going to be surprised about what it is that brings up anger for them. Like they may have this very long conversation with their insurance company about what they need and how they need it, and they finally got their money, and none of that bothered them, but a board that's on the ground that was covering the window that was broken where the water came into their home.
Sure.
That board is a trigger that causes anger, where their big long fight with the insurance company for a year doesn't cause the same thing.
Exactly, because it's the memory of what was. And they haven't quite got back to that yet. And so I feel like you're exactly right, that those are the things that trigger things. And so, really being able to communicate that and talk with someone else and share that. Maybe it's not your family, maybe it's not your close friend. It is a stranger, so you're calling our call line, or you're talking to a counselor, new, whatever it takes for you to be able to express that and work through it.
Yeah, and just it takes us a while to start processing. We've been in emergency mode for a long time, going from shock and denial to anger, and shock and denial to anger, and shock and denial to anger.
Oh yeah, going back and forth.
Right. And so once we get to that point where we start to feel things, and we know depression is the fourth stage of, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, as the fourth stage, people start getting down. That's when we need to start reaching out. And your team, kind of like you mentioned, with everybody's got different jobs and doing whatever the job is, your team's been able and been willing to do lots of different things to help.
I just want to state that I have phenomenal staff. And so not once did I hear from anyone, that's not my job. All I heard was, what do you need me to do? And where do we need to go? And we'll do that. And they were they wanted to staff the clinics like 2 days after. I'm like, take time, get yourself ready, take care of your family. And the following week, we really got our clinics back up and running. And we had so much help to get that done, with generators that came from the Army Corps of Engineers. Louisiana Department of Health helped us, Terrebonne Parish, all our parishes, and we have 7 parishes, so we have to communicate with all the EOCs.
Right.
And we have to talk with the public health. We help them with the shelters. It was a lot.
Right.
And we really, pushed them to their limits. But they got it done. And so, as I said, it was very important that we also made sure that we were taking care of them, our staff emotionally, giving them the time, taking some time off. We were skeleton crews for a while, and we had them trading out and stuff.
Right.
And so
Rotating.
it was important that they were able to take care of themselves as well.
Well, and that really is the only way we know as clinicians, the only way to really help somebody else is if you're in a point and a place where
You got to be in a good
do
place.
that.
Yeah, you got to be in a good place.
We got to have our stuff okay.
Yeah.
And administratively, that's the message that came across. And I'm so very glad for all of the leadership in our area, and especially
Amazing leadership.
through South Central, about saying, slow down, take a breath. I know you want to take care of everybody else. Let's take care of ourselves as we're trying to do that. y'all did it very, very quickly.
We did. And once again, I want to thank all of our staff for that, because they were the ones that really jumped to the core and made that happen. And, and I want to thank HTV as well. I would call in and speak to Martin while he was, on the show, and tell him where we were and what we were doing and some of our needs. We need a generator. We need to get diesel. We need to get gas. And, there was just help from so many people.
It was remarkable.
Yeah.
And so we know very often that in times of crisis, some people experience more drama. Other people can really slow down and get things done. And it was truly the latter in response to that. So we know what we've learned. Let's talk about some of the options that we want to teach other people about, right?
Sure. So we are providing some trainings that are coming up. If we can go to that Skills for Psychological Recovery slide. So we are working with our partners, Louisiana Department of Health, and also FEMA and a host of other organizations, to put on some trainings coming up. So September 19th through the 20th. And there will be a training there at our office on Regal Row. And it's an evidence-informed modular intervention that helps survivors gain skills to manage distress and cope with post-disaster. This is an excellent course. You see there that the things that are included in that are gathering information, prioritizing positive activities, and the such. And then there's a second one, if you'll pull that up, that's psychological first aid. Now, some of this, I know that a lot of people have heard about this in the community. This has been around for years, taught by FEMA, that happens after disasters, and we've been working hard to get our FEMA friends down here to teach this. It's going to be at the St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office there in Luling. And so this is truly evidence-based. And
Right.
it gives clinicians and providers skills to use after a disaster, and helping people really work through their emotions and their feelings, but yet giving them some resources to be able to have to deal with what has happened to them.
Wow, this is really exciting. Both the skills recovery and the option to be able to work through that and learn that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
that's just really, really unique.
if we can pull up that next slide, and I will tell you that you have to fill out an application. So that's on our website, SCLHS.org, and those applications will actually be reviewed by the instructor, Dr. Melissa Breimer, and you see there, she's with UCLA. She's coming
Right.
in to do this test, and so she'll be the one that decides who's going to be participating in the classes and how large the classes will be. So if you're interested, please go online, fill that out, and get that. Our next slide shows you.
One second, Lisa. I'm going to interrupt
Yeah.
you just for a second, if you don't mind. I want to go back and let you know that go to www.sclhsa.org.
Yes.
Again, to complete the training applications, and you can email those completed forms to Dr. Melissa Breimer, and that's at mbrymer@mednet.ucla.edu.
Yes.
And so I apologize for interrupting you.
That's
But Lisa,
okay.
the reason I interrupted you is because I want to come back and recap some of this a little bit more. And more importantly, I want the people that are just listening to the show,
Yeah.
not watching it, to be able to get that as well.
So I know that we were kind of touching back on the classes that we have coming up, and we wanted to talk a little bit more about psychological first aid.
Right.
So
And what we've learned. So it was one of those things that you talked about so important that we've learned. One of the things we've learned is that people like to listen. So they sometimes hear even this froggy voice right now. They listen to the voice, but they don't necessarily like watching the face. So Jen, put that back up if you don't mind. And so I want to be able to share that information. So as Lisa begins talking about this psychological first aid, you just need to know, like we mentioned last segment, you need to be able to go and complete a training application and email it to this Dr. Melissa Breimer, who is coming in from UCLA to be able to do this with us. And so you can go to www.sclhsa.org, and you can get all the information on that website. And you need to email those completed forms to mbreiner@mednet.ucla.edu. Now we can get into a little bit more about it, because people are listening like, Keith, you have to keep saying stuff because we can't watch you, but sometimes we leave it on and just listen.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's one of the things we learned from Ida.
All right.
So the psychological first aid, which is so important.
yeah, so if we can bring that slide up again on the psychological first aid and talk a little bit about the things the core actions that are included in the class itself.
Okay.
And so contact and engagement, learning how to respond, and to contacts initiated by survivors. So that would be like our call line, or if you're getting calls in here or anywhere.
Right.
And how to respond to them in a non-intrusive, compassionate, and helpful manner. Very, very important.
Yeah, because when people are stressed, they very often bring their stress with them, and very often that can make it difficult for other people.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're angry on the phone. Sometimes they are, but then you have to learn how to kind of, de-escalate.
That is correct, and
that
compassionately.
situation. Right. There's also talking about safety and comfort and enhancing immediate and ongoing safety and providing physical and emotional comfort. That's very important as well. All of these items are stabilization if needed. So once again, to calm and orient emotionally overwhelmed or disoriented survivors, it is a skill to be able to do that.
Yep.
And that's why we have masters and licensed clinicians prepared on the phone trying to do that.
Right.
Information gathering on current needs and concerns, immediate needs and concerns, gathering additional information, and tailor your psychological first aid intervention. So you will learn this in this class, how to do that. Practical assistance, so offering practical help to the survivors. Connection with social supports, which is huge anytime after
Absolutely.
a disaster, or any type of event, which is why we found that so important after the storm that our website, our Facebook page, we tried to inundate it daily with everything. So our marketing team, Janet Price was heading that up. We were just putting everything we can find from all 7 parishes on there so people could say, well, not just Terrebonne Parish, but we were doing St. James Parish, St. John. So giving them information they can use to
Right.
get the help they need.
Right, and kind of real life information, live.
Right.
Because a lot of people maybe had email where they didn't have phone service, or they could
Right.
get information through text where they didn't have phone service.
Most definitely. So also connecting with social supports, and we said that information on coping, huge. Yeah. So we think we can handle it, and then sometimes we realize we're not that good at it, and we need a little help
Right.
to get us through those tough times.
Yeah, and being able to say, I need some help coping.
Yeah.
And we all need that help. All of us need help coping. All
At
of
any
us.
point in time in your life, you're going to need help. We've all been there. I've been there.
That's
and
right.
you have to be able to admit it.
That's right.
Right. And then linkage with collaborative services. And so linking survivors with available services that they need at that point in time. It's all huge.
And what's available.
Yes.
One of the things we found, like you guys got online, y'all were ready within a week. Not everybody's always ready that quickly, or that timeline. Being able to do that quickly, and seeing what is or isn't available.
Right.
Who's got a building
Right.
where some other people didn't.
Right.
And so that kind of thing.
We
So-
were very lucky at that point in time. They needed a lot of remediation, but we got that done fairly quickly, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's no way to do that without getting a lot of help from a lot of places. So
From
let's
everybody.
talk about who kind of helped made this happen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of mention some of the sponsors for this training because it's linked with so many different facets. The Department of Children and Family Services, of course with FEMA, the Governor's Office, with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, Louisiana Department of Health, and of course ourselves. So
Right.
there's so much really good information that you will glean from being a member of these classes, from being able to ask questions and really learn from those that have been involved in disasters all over our country. I know that we probably think, well, we can tell you what it's all about. We've been through so many hurricanes, we've been through a lot of other disasters, but sometimes you just need a little reminder about some of the skills that you can use to help people work through situations.
Well, and like Earl Hughes talks about all the time, what we learned from Lake Charles and the 2 storms that hit them really made an impact for our preparation.
Sure.
For ours, which in some areas, in some situations, could have been much worse. But we learned from what they did, and it made it a little bit easier.
Right.
And
And I'd like to say, too, that anything that we learn in these types of classes, you can adapt to your area because not all resources are the same.
Right.
In every part of the country, or not even in our own state.
Right.
So to be able
Right.
to be flexible and adapt those types
Right.
of skills as well.
Just what's needed.
Yep.
And finally, help people if they need help. The
Help
place they can always go. Put up that slide if you don't mind for us.
Yeah.
Those resource sites
Yeah.
available there.
So our app, our resource app, please download this, use it. We, not just when there's disaster or an event, but anytime. Also our website, SCLHSA.org, and then our Facebook page you see there. You're going to get a lot of good information on there daily. Did you knows, anything that's going on in the community. And then lastly, but most importantly, where all of our clinics are located. And then our call line,
That one-
877-500-9999. 7997.
So very important
Yes.
because so many people need it. Lisa, we always really appreciate and value all of the information and education you provide to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.
All right, guys, that will do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV.